Hello, I'm Carrie Gard, and welcome to Tea Time with Tech Marketing Leaders. Welcome back to the show. As an FYI, friendly reminder, if you will, that this is the last week where I'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I know you've gotten used to it. I've settled you in, and now I'm going to mix it up again. I got to move to 8 a.m. Pacific Time. I'm really sorry to my West Coasters. I am not a morning person, so I appreciate that this might be hitting hard. My children, on the other hand, are at that age where a 7:30 p.m. bedtime is no longer acceptable, and they are pushing back to 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I need to be there for them, which means I am moving my show up to 8 a.m. Pacific time. It's the earliest I could make it happen for you guys without trying to roll you out of bed at 6, 7 a.m. And just in time for my East Coasters as they're headed off to lunch. So I think it's a happy medium. Maybe? I guess the data will tell us. Thank you, data. I'm really excited for this conversation. I have so many more booked up for the rest of the year, so I do hope you will tune in. And if you don't, that's okay because we'll be recording them and publishing them later on, and you'll be able to tune on in and not miss a beat. Beauty of life. It's the beauty of life. If you're here with us today, we love your questions. All the questions in all of the land. We will be paying attention and looking forward to answering all of those questions because believe me, I have many, many questions for Nick around this topic as I am currently living in the purgatory, if you will, between research and commercialization. And I feel like AI has come onto the market out of nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And we feel like it just came out of the woodwork. It was developed yesterday, and now we're all trying to figure out how to use it when in fact, it's been in research for 10 plus years. This is happening. Cybersecurity is a wonderful example of this too, where it was sort of like a defense mechanism of the DOJ. And now all of a sudden we're all trying to figure it out. That is not news, folks. That is just from research to commercialization in which we are living. I also work for a company who is in the energy space. In Fusion, they are very much still in the research phase, but they are currently thinking about how to commercialize. It's this wild world of like this purgatory that happens. And for us as consumers, it happens overnight. But believe me, for the folks behind the scenes, like marketers, it is years in the making, and Nick is going to bring us along. Before we get there, a little bit about Nick Orlando. Nick is in Florida. Yes, that is true, folks. Let's just get that out of the way. Today, he's in New York City, which is near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate. But yes, helpful way to remember Nick is that Nick Orlando does live in Florida. He is a seasoned marketing leader with a deep technical foundation. He thrives at the intersection of innovation and strategy. With a decade of experience in driving growth for cutting-edge AI and technology companies, he brings a unique blend of visionary leadership and hands-on expertise. His passion lies in building high-performance teams, crafting compelling narratives, and leveraging data-driven insights to propel brand success. He believes in the power of small, consistent improvements to achieve extraordinary results and is dedicated to leading with authenticity, adaptability, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for doing my job for me. That was a beautiful intro, and I love that I just could grab that right from your LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's perfect because it's exactly what we're talking about today in terms of your sort of your history and what you've been through. But what's your story?
Yeah.
This is sort of an encapsulation of like the stuff, but really what we would know is how you got there. So bring us along. Tell
Yeah,
us your journey.
absolutely. So my journey actually began at the University of Michigan studying computer science. So obviously that's a little bit different than a career in marketing. But I also have always been just absolutely, really excited about entrepreneurship. So when I graduated from school, my first job was in door-to-door sales with Edward Jones as a financial advisor. I got just absolutely rejected left and right every single day. It was the best learning experience of my life. I don't think I'll ever go back to door-to-door sales, but it was such a good opportunity for me. And ultimately, I wanted to get back into the tech space because, studying computer science, I always love seeing where technology is going. And I graduated from school at a really unique time where AI was starting to gain a lot of momentum in the market. And a lot of people don't know that, right? Most people think of AI as ChatGPT and having been released in late 2022. So my journey in the AI space began with a small conversational AI company called Clink that's based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it was founded by several professors in their PhD lab from the University of Michigan. At that company, I did just about everything. I just wanted to be immersed in whatever they wanted me to do. I wanted to do it. So I did sales engineering, I did marketing, I did customer success. I went to events, I did keynote speeches, I did operations work. I did just about everything. And then, over time, my journey led me to Hawaii during COVID. So COVID happened. I was living in downtown Detroit, and it was brutal living in a 600 square foot high rise. So my wife and I moved to Hawaii. We decided to relocate to Kona on the Big Island, which we absolutely love. Unfortunately for myself, Hawaii is in a bit of a rough time zone when you're working for an Eastern Standard Time company. So as the world opened up, I was working for a company called Core AI. I was leading their product marketing organization. And then the opportunity came for me to relocate to Florida. That's how we're not in Orlando proper, but we're in Vero Beach, Florida. But ultimately, my journey led me to Amelia, where I'm currently at. We had some really big news last week, which I'm sure we'll touch on. We were acquired by SoundHound AI, which was a blast from the past. I remember them from back in the 2016, 2017 days. But for the past almost decade, I've been in the AI space. And it's been just a phenomenal journey where I've just loved seeing how it's developed. I've loved being a part of that. And I've loved helping to tell that story because in the media and in the world, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around AI. There's a lot of doom and gloom. There's a lot of apocalyptic scenarios that are painted. Most of those are completely, untrue, quite frankly. And I really try to bring the positive perspective because there's so much value, there's so much excitement, and there's so much good opportunity for AI in the world. And that's really where I've wanted to be at. Since I got out of school, I always wanted to be working on something that I thought would change the world. And I believe that quite frankly, ChatGPT already has changed the world in some ways. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg. So I've always wanted to be a part of something that excited me. And I've always loved the intersection of technology and business. And that led me to marketing, and that led me to AI.
What a lovely story. Oh my gosh. And a COVID story where you like ran away to an island. I can so relate.
Great.
uh, yeah. I mean, when they can shut their borders and say you can't come in unless you quarantine,
Right.
really kind of helped. Just a little, just a teensy bit. So,
It's really easy to social distance on a beach. I will say.
chlorine kills germs. Very, very helpful. Um, no, I absolutely love that. I wrote them all down. I have so many questions about
Yeah.
your journey and how it relates to our conversation today. But I do want to know, as a marketer, Nick, for where you are right now, we're all human. It's a different world. COVID's sort of over. We're potentially on the verge of a, um, uh, we're gonna have another crash. That they've been saying that for months, potentially years.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
Now it seems to be like creeping up, like be a little bit more, but inflation's down and the market's doing well, so who knows?
Right.
Um, it's a different world than 4 years ago, but as a marketer, having moved around, having been in AI for a while, what's hard for you? What's still a challenge or a new challenge that you're currently facing?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge is just the noise in the market. If you go back to the 2017, 2018 timeframe, there were a lot of AI companies who were building, virtual agents. And again, the nomenclature has changed a little bit, right? It started off as chatbots, then we started calling them virtual assistants. Then some folks started calling them virtual agents. Now we're calling them AI agents, which I can live with. Everything evolves. But there were a lot of companies on the scene, but it was really, really hard to build and deploy this technology at scale. Obviously, the technology has advanced significantly over the past handful of years, especially with the introduction of large language models and generative AI. It's still really hard to have consistently good experiences in what I would call high risk scenarios. And what I mean by high risk scenarios is if you're calling into your bank or if you're speaking to your healthcare provider and you're dealing with highly sensitive information, highly private information, and there can't be a hallucination, there can't be something that goes wrong, right? It has to be correct every single time. And the biggest challenge in the marketing space, in honestly, just in the business space of AI, has been the amount of noise. Because if I thought that there were a lot of these companies in 2017, 2018, it has completely exploded. It seems like there's 5 to 10 new competitors coming up every single week. And everybody says the same thing. Everybody, speaks the same language. They say the same thing. They say the same technical jargon. And it all sounds great, but how do you know what's real and what's not? How do you cut through that noise? And how do you be transparent around what you can deliver and how well you can deliver that? So that has been the single greatest challenge, in my opinion, for every AI company over the past, 5 to 10 years.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And when you think about the cybersecurity industry, I keep coming back to cyber because I feel like they're like 5 years apart,
Right.
if that, right? So like cyber sort of happened and exploded onto the scene as well of being not that important to now all of a sudden everybody, including consumers, needing it like yesterday. And I feel like AI happened in the same way. And this isn't going to be the last time we see an industry sort of do this, especially with the way how fast, to your point, Nick, tech moves. Like it's
Okay.
sort of in research behind the scenes, nobody sees it, then everybody sees it.
Right.
So um no, I think your challenge is interesting in that it's still a little bit niche
Mhm.
for those hyper startup-y, what's it called? It's like when it's behind the scenes and it's not quite ready yet. It's
Oh,
like
in stealth mode.
stealth mode. Yeah, I feel like there's those stealth mode sort of
Yeah.
industries. AI being one, cyber being one. I think energy is
Yeah.
being kind of like that right now too. And so, yeah, I think it's important to have this conversation to help people realize that I know it feels very new to you, but it's actually not that new.
Right.
In your experience, like you've been around the block, you mentioned 2017. That's when AI came on the scene for you, but is that when AI started in general? How old, in your experience or your knowledge, when did AI sort of start behind the scenes of like the research really beginning?
Yeah, what's interesting is AI's been around since the 1950s or 60s, I want to say, is when the term and the space, first came to light. I think that if you go back that far, obviously what was meant by AI is a very different thing than what we mean by AI today. I think that where there was a big inflection point is somewhere in the early 2010s, once deep neural networks were created that started to model the way that the human brain thinks. So the classical AI was that you would build a bunch of different rules, right? And a bunch of grammars. So you would try and model the parts of speech, and you would say, oh, I have a noun, a verb, an adjective, and I have all of these different things. I'm going to try and label all of those so that I can map that to some rule and understand what that means. That is where you saw a lot of the really like broken and chat body experiences, right? The ones that you say something and it just doesn't work and it keeps breaking. In the 2010s, once we had the introduction of neural networks, what you could do is you could take 10,000 different ways or 1,000 different ways that you would say something, right? Like, how do I check my balance for my bank account, or how do I transfer money, or how much money did I spend in California last year? And now you could take all of these examples and you could give these examples to a machine learning algorithm, and that machine learning algorithm could model similar ways that it could, or model how people talk about that. So then if somebody asks that question, but they don't ask it in the specific way that it's been trained on, it'll still understand what the user is saying because it has an idea and a probability, right? It was a probabilistic model where it's basing its guess on what the user is saying on the level of certainty or confidence that a user is asking a certain question. So I would say that things really changed once neural networks were introduced. And that's what led to, in the 2015, 16, 17, that was the first wave of these conversational AI enterprise companies and platforms starting to be built. And then there was
Is
another.
that, I just
Yeah,
want to clarify, Nick.
yeah,
Is that like the, when the Alexas of the world and the Siris and the Google, whatever Google's
yeah.
voice was, is that when those voice chats sort of came online and we all had to yell at our phones?
Yes, that is the early phases of like machine learning, deep learning, and these neural networks that were.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, so we have been interacting with AI to some degree.
absolutely.
We're gonna be yelling at it, but
Yes,
we're
we've
trying.
been very upset with our AI for a long time, for sure.
I also want to clarify too, when you
Mhm.
were talking about and describing it in an early stage,
Yes.
it felt like when those chess games were sort of coming,
Mhm.
those early days of like where a computer could beat a pro chess player.
Yep.
Is that sort of those early stages too of where that's AI?
Yep, absolutely. And I think that so within AI is really an umbrella of technologies, right? So within AI, you have it, because the area that I'm very well versed in is natural language processing, right? So anything
Amazing.
understanding language. There's also fields like computer vision, where it's, if you've ever seen Silicon Valley, it's like hot dog or not hot dog, right? Like where it's trying to understand what, based on like what image recognition is looking like. So absolutely, with the chess one, again, what they did is they gave tons of examples of how to play chess, and then it was doing a certain learning technique where it was understanding how it was getting beat, and then it was using that to retrain itself to get better over time. And then once you have enough examples of it getting beat, it's going to know how to model a game of chess so that it can, beat a chess player.
Win, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because so talk to us about the evolution between all that AI that we've actually been coming face to face with
Yep.
to now feeling like AI is a thing happen, because of ChatGPT. Like, why
Yeah.
is this all of a sudden? Why are our minds were not blown with Alexa and Siri, but
Right.
all of a sudden it's like a whole different world. What, in your opinion, has caused this phenomena?
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple, and it was the introduction of the transformer model and the transformer architecture. So that happened it was either 2019 or 2020. There were a number of researchers who published a paper called "Attention is All You Need," and that introduced the transformer architecture. And essentially, I'll explain it at a very high level, and then feel free to ask questions, and we can get deeper into the weeds if you'd like. But essentially, what the transformer model did is, before, what you were doing is you were taking a machine learning model, a deep neural network that didn't know about anything, right? And then you were getting a lot of data. So there's a couple ways, and what I mean by data are examples of how somebody says something. So I would get, if I'm talking about, how to check my balance, right? How much money do I have? What's my cash situation? What amount of money do I have in my checking account today? All of these different ways. USAA did a research study a number of years ago, and they found that there's over 20,000 ways that somebody can ask, what is my balance? How much money do I have in my account? And so essentially what you were doing back in the day is you were trying to get as many examples as possible. Sometimes you just have, your crew of 1 or 2 people who's just typing all of the ways that they can think of. Sometimes you would use a crowdsourcing mechanism like Amazon Mechanical Turks, where you could essentially say, you could give examples for how, people would ask a certain question. You would pay people, 5 cents or a penny per response that they give. You go to lunch, you get 10,000 answers in the next hour. And then you have to sift through like what's a good example and what's a bad example. And then you have to train the model on that. Right. So that was kind of like the 2016, 2017 way. Obviously, there's some of those models are still being used today. There's a time and a place to use those models where you have complete control over the data that you're training the model on. But what happened with the transformer architecture is essentially we were able to train models on drastically more information. But like ChatGPT was trained on, I think the initial one was like 175 billion parameters. And the newer ones are even far, far more than that, which you could think of that as like the entire internet's worth of data, right? Think of every Wikipedia page ever created, downloaded, and put into this model. And essentially, we are able to train much bigger and much larger models. And because of the transformer architecture, which has something called the self-learning or the attention mechanism, which essentially is allowing you to read a sentence forwards and backwards, and also to make connections between different words within longer series of text within whole paragraphs, we're able to get something that modeled, someone with a kindergarten or a first grade education. And then the more data that you put into it, and then the more fine tuning that you did, the higher quality you could get. Because when the paper was first published, that you got to remember, ChatGPT was launched with either GPT-3 or GPT 3.5. There was a GPT-1 and there was a GPT-2 as well. And
Right.
they weren't very good, but they were much better than these other things. And now you have GPT-4, GPT-4o, and these crazy models that can do phenomenal things. So essentially, the thing that changed is the amount of data that was trained on these models, and the way that the architecture works allowed for you to understand language much better. And it also introduced the generative part, where it's able to create language and actually just generate the text back to a user.
So that's the big move. It's so helpful to understand how all of this works, especially when you're looking at 1 or 2. I think we were arguing with 1 or 2 with Alexa and Google
Right.
and Siri. Man, I still feel that way. But I think that's the key with ChatGPT and why it was so transformative, is that we're able to engage with it back in a way where it's not asking for a song or
Mhm.
to add something to our grocery list
Right.
or hey, buy this thing for us from Amazon, but
Yeah.
to actually say, I want to produce something,
Mhm.
and then to work with it to get to what we want when we're not writers and graphic designers, and to feel empowered and in control. And I think that was sort of like I'm with you. It was like sort of this explosion that happened because we could
Right.
actually almost pump it for information in a way that
Oh,
we
yeah.
couldn't do before. But I think it's important to know and to understand that actually we've been engaging with AI all along. It's
Oh, yeah.
just fancier now.
Right.
What
Exactly.
I
Fancier and much better.
Much better, although it crashed on me today, which was kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, when it's trying to crunch that much data and everybody's trying to do it at the same time, we're up against the clock on that one.
Yeah.
Take what I can get. I do want to understand from a marketing perspective.
That's
This is a marketing podcast after all.
totally.
Although you're very well versed in AI, and this is what's really helpful having experts on it in a specific industry, and why I
Mhm.
love these industries from AI to cybersecurity to data management, because y'all are in such this interesting niche that has its own like challenges. Although I will say FUD is universal. I'll get back to that.
That
I
is.
do want to understand from a marketing perspective. You've been working in AI since 2017. It's just come on the scene for all of us,
Mhm.
but clearly you've been working on it for a while.
Yeah.
So when you're in that research, especially working on it from a this is so interesting that you were working with the University of Michigan
Mhm.
on something that wasn't even real yet. I appreciate you wore a lot of hats, but from a marketing perspective,
Yes.
where were you seeing sort of the initial like what were you trying to accomplish from a marketing perspective when it's that early on?
Yeah, when it was that early on, what was really challenging was, you know, AI and cybersecurity is in a similar state where these are highly technical industries, right? And they're industries that very few people have deep domain expertise. And then you have to go to a bank or to a restaurant or to a hospital, and you have to explain how this works and how it's going to create value for their business. And you have business leaders as well as technical leaders who you need to explain this stuff to. So, from a marketing perspective, in the early days, the biggest challenge was, how do we? So we are in a stage where essentially it was a really cool technology. We're kind of still in that phase right now. This is a really cool technology. So what? Right? There's tons of AI companies that pop up. So what? What problem do you solve? What value do you create? And that's kind of the big gap that you have to try and traverse is okay, we have this really amazing technology. Why do people actually care about it? And that was one of the things that we spent a lot of time on back in the day. It was like, okay, well, do what problem do we want to solve? What industry do we want to work in? Where's the biggest opportunity? And even back in the day, one of the areas that screamed at us was customer service, right? Because think of how many times you call into a bank, call into an airline, to a hotel, you call into wherever, and you're either put on hold for 20 or 30 minutes, maybe longer. You go through this phone tree that's absolutely terrible. Press one for this, press two for that. Or, the early stages of these chatbots where you say something, you ask for help and it doesn't know. It was a terrible experience. And now we have something that is actually able to understand what a person is saying. Back in the day, it did take a lot more time and you had to be a little bit patient with getting the experience to be fairly high quality, and the chatbots still would break every now and again. But essentially, the biggest thing was going from this really cool technology to saying this concretely is a problem that we're going to solve. This is what the solution looks like. This is how we're going to deliver the solution, and this is the expected value. And then it was about getting people to believe in that, right? We needed to find who are the early adopters of this technology, who are the people who are going to take a risk on a tiny little startup and invest in this so that we can try and build out something that's absolutely transformative.
I'm not gonna lie, I still yell at my bank's AI. I
I
mean,
do
I
too.
just want a person
Not
sometimes.
going to name
Sometimes,
names, but there are some
not.
banks that need some improved AI experiences.
Sometimes you just feel like you need a person because the AI is just not getting it.
I hear you.
Um, yeah, I agree that AI, and I think this is where we can transition our conversation to sort of the fun of it all, because I
Mhm.
do think I wonder. I don't know. We're having this conversation in real time, and I'm wondering out loud
Mhm.
did AI come on the scene too early? Like ChatGPT is now has now blown it up in a different way, but when you think about how we've been interacting with AI for so long, I feel like maybe it was a little too early, and maybe that's why we're having such a negative connotation with it in some regard, because it just wasn't, the
Mhm.
cookie wasn't baked yet. It needed to be in the oven a little longer. And now we're all a bit frustrated with having to like call up a service and just sometimes wanting a person.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It is fair. I would not, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was, kind of put into the market too early, because with any technology, you need to have a bad experience before you can make a good one, right? Like even the first touchscreens on Palm Pilots and
Oh,
whatnot
true.
were pretty terrible. You had to press them really hard. Nobody completely liked them. It was very cool, but it was like it wasn't very. There wasn't a ton of value or
Fair.
utility there. So in my opinion, every technology needs to go through its infancy and adolescent stage where you're like, wow, that technology sucks. And it's got to suck, because if it doesn't, unless I don't think that I've ever seen a technology that's just brilliant on day one. Even look at the evolution of computers, right? The first
Mm,
computers, you couldn't even take them home. The invention of the first
they're too big.
PCs were massive, right? They were heavy.
Yeah.
You had a desktop, you had this giant monitor that had like it probably weighed 10 or 15 pounds. I mean, look
Yes.
at how far we've advanced over the past 30 or 40 years with that. We got to go through that clunky phase. We got to get through it, because if we're in that clunky phase, that means that we're failing little by little forward, right? And
Yeah.
ultimately, with everything, you need to be able to see it in the hands of users, how people expect the technology to work. There's times where we put this technology out into the market and people say things that we're baffled. We're like, why are you asking this from your bank's AI? Like that's not a banking question. But you kind of have to account for that, because
Yeah.
people are gonna experiment, and they're gonna test the limits of this technology. People have done that with Chat GPT as well. So I wouldn't say that it was deployed too early. What I will say is that I think that there have been some expectations that have been set too high. There were expectations probably in 2016, 2017 that were set that were just not realistic given the time. Even now with ChatGPT, I think that if you're in a knowledge working job, ChatGPT should provide some level of value for you, whether it's creating the first draft of a one pager, or helping you to understand how to digest certain data or research, or if it explains to you a concept that you don't really understand in simple terms, right? There's some
Hmm.
level of value that you can get out of ChatGPT today, but I would argue that given the promise, it hasn't lived up to the promise of completely changing the world in every way, shape, and form just yet, right? It is
Yeah.
exciting, it's cool, but a lot of people are just like, wow, I can ask ChatGPT to write a poem. Oh, I can have it make a rap in the style of Eminem, right? Like but it's not
It's
like
cool.
people are right, which is great, but it's like, is that real world value in every way, shape, and form? Like, I don't think so. So I think that we're still in the infancy and adolescent stage. I think we're quickly getting to a point where, in the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see an inflection point, and the value is going to start really catching up with what's been promised. But I think that that's been the challenge, is the expectation was set a little bit too high early on.
And who set the expectations? I think that's a really key point when you think about how computers, like if you're comparing it to
Mm-hmm.
just computing in general,
Mm-hmm.
right? How fascinated we were
Oh
with
yeah.
this thing that sat on our desktop at home and what we could do with it from a just, you know, writing a document standpoint and printing,
Right.
to then, the iMac sort of
Mm-hmm.
mentality. I feel like there's definitely a different set of implications there. It was more of an oh wow versus an oh no. So
Yeah.
whose job was it to set the right expectations? Why do you think we are where we are in terms of those expectations? And I don't want to point fingers at marketing, but also like how can we learn from this as marketers and do better?
Yeah, well, I think that and that's why, in my opinion, if you're in a very technical field as a marketer, you need to have some level of understanding in that technology. You can't just accept at face value, that this thing works, right? So I would say that, marketing maybe to blame a little bit. I don't even think that it's anybody's fault though, right? I think that the CEOs of the very first companies all had a grand vision that is amazing, right? You grow up and you watch movies like Star Wars and Star Trek where you can talk to robots and you can talk to your spaceship or your vehicle, or you can talk to anything and it understands you, and it's able to respond to you. So I don't think that there was any malicious intent from the people who really created this industry. I believe that they were, just ahead of their time at the end of the day. They set a vision, and the cool thing is there are a number of those people who are still working on this problem today and still trying to solve it in the best way possible to create that value and realize the vision. That's the thing is like, the internet's at a place now where look at how big of an economy the internet has created. And we all kind of, well, maybe people don't forget, but we can look back at the late 90s and early 2000s in the dot-com bust in the bubble. And the internet was like, there were headlines that I still see today, like people will screenshot them from back in the 90s and early 2000s, that the internet was going to be, a big failure and nobody was going to use the internet. Look at the internet today. It has created complete new economies and industries. And I think that AI is actually going to be even bigger. I think that we're still in those early phases of the AI revolution, or however you want to phrase it. And the cool thing is, over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that the amount of value created is going to arguably exceed what's been created with the internet.
So let's talk about the dead space. Not dead space. It's definitely not dead. There's a lot happening, but
Yeah.
for the consumer, they don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
Of I'm happy. So I'll just set the stage. I'm going through this right now. I'm
Yes.
working with a company in fusion. They're
Mhm.
building micro fusion reactors. Fusion isn't even on the scene yet,
Right.
right? I didn't even know this was happening before I joined the industry. I was like, wait, what?
Mhm.
I know about fission. Tell me more about fusion. And now I'm like here helping, support this thing.
Right.
And it's definitely in its infancy, and the people who are aware of it are scared of it, and then the people who are trying to build it and make it a thing are fired up about it. Is
Mhm.
how do we as marketers help change the narrative
Mhm.
around, not because we're trying to trick people, but because it's the reality. Like, AI can be scary if you really want to make it that way, and
Yeah.
it can be really helpful and useful if you want to make it that way. Fusion's
Mhm.
the same way. Fusion can't really be scary because it can't be turned into a bomb like fission in
Mhm.
the sense that if the energy isn't there, it just burns out like a star. It's gone. It's done.
Mhm.
Um, all it can do is help. It's really hard to get it to help, and there's a lot of that has to go
Yeah.
into it to make it to work.
Mhm.
And I feel like AI is similar. There's always going to be the bad actors who are going to try and use this thing, and there's always going to be the cybersecurity marketers and industries and companies who are trying to shut it down, and that's just going to be the nature of the game.
Mhm.
But in the long term, there is use for AI. So how it seems like you had to do a similar thing, or maybe you're in the throes of it, of
Mhm.
trying to change the narrative from this FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, to
Yeah.
saying there's opportunity here. So from a marketing perspective, is it's always the trifecta in marketing, right? It's the right people with the
Mhm.
right message at the right time.
Yeah.
So it feels like it's been very polarized and a little bit politicized,
Mhm.
of the people who are all for it and trying to figure it out, and the people who are absolutely terrified of it. And there's some people in the middle who are trying to still figure out which side they're on.
Mhm.
As a marketer, what are you doing right now to help facilitate the right message, the right people at the right time?
Yeah, that's a great question. My approach to this has been, how do we make AI more accessible to the everyday person? How do you make AI understood by someone who's not a PhD in machine learning, right? The people who are absolute experts from a technical perspective in this field are not afraid of AI. The fear comes from the thought of Terminators and AGI, right?
Right.
This nebulous bar of AGI, artificial general intelligence, which can do anything better than human beings. It's going to realize that human beings are bad for the planet, and then, you know, bad things are going to happen, right? That's like the classic like apocalyptic narrative. And for me, we're so far away from that. I think that that's the first thing I want people to understand. We are so far away from that. And when I say so far, maybe we could have an incredibly intelligent system that can do things that are far better than humans in many, many ways in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. I think in our lifetime, we'll see some systems that completely blow our minds away. But what people don't understand is ChatGPT looks like it can do things like reasoning. It can't. It's not reasoning. It is taking the data that it's been trained on, and then to generate a response, it is taking a probability of the most confident next word in a sequence, and then it's putting that word out to you. So that's not reasoning. There's a big gap or a big difference between that probability and reasoning. So, my biggest thing is to, number one, tell people like we are not like, it's not like tomorrow AI is going to take over and whatever. Number two, there's a lot of guardrails and controls that we have and will continue to have, and will develop even better guardrails and controls to make sure that AI can't just go and create a mind of its own and go off and do stuff and have access to things that it shouldn't have access to, right? To your point, there's always going to be bad actors. There's going to be people who are trying to use this technology for the wrong reasons. But in my opinion, the best way that we can combat the FUD and the kind of doom and gloom and the apocalyptic scenarios is by educating people to understand what is real and what is not real. And I think that it starts with education, it starts with understanding, it starts with trying to bring people together instead of divide more people into these polar opposite camps.
Oh my gosh, I agree wholeheartedly, especially with the division piece.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting. I do think the more you use it, the more you realize how dumb it is. It
Oh
really
yeah.
is. Like,
Oh
you
yeah.
do need the right prompts to really hone it
Mm.
for the power it can produce. Like, there does need to be a human with thoughtful intention behind it to make it work.
Oh yeah.
And I've seen that firsthand for sure. I mean, for me, in the way that I use it is I don't like it to write for me firsthand because, oh my gosh, does it
Mm-hmm.
sound vanilla.
Oh yeah.
When you talk, I mean, it's like, here's the best example I have of it. I'm an artist, so I went to school for photography and I had to learn all about just how paint and art works. And so when you mix all of the pigment colors together, not light, I want to be clear, I know the difference between pigment and light. When you mix all the pigments together, you get this gross color brown, right? But when you hone the right blues with the right reds and you get this beautiful purple that's
Mhm.
different, right? And so AI is sort of like the
Yep.
gross muddy brown because it's literally taking everything from the internet
Oh
and sort
yeah.
of just regurgitating it back to you. My husband likes to call it a parrot,
Right.
right?
Yep.
He's an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
He understands how this stuff works. He
Yep.
studied machine learning, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whatever you put into the machine, it then just spits out as a parrot.
Right.
It has no context or feeling, nor may it ever. We don't know yet, but really, I think to your point, Nick, we are worlds away from
Oh
that.
yeah.
So it's not about AI being scary. It's about the people who are potentially wielding it and figuring it out who are still scary. That's
Yeah.
nothing new. That's
Right.
just what it is.
Exactly.
Um, So I love what you're talking about in terms of getting it to the hands of people, because the more you play with it, the more
Yeah.
you easily realize that. So how are you with Amelia and the tools you've used before this? What's sort of your marketing plan, play, approach
Yeah.
of getting it into the hands of as many people as possible to really realize that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that goes back earlier in this conversation. I brought up, how AI is a really cool technology, but really cool technologies don't necessarily translate into successful businesses. So at Amelia, we're incredibly focused on identifying the biggest problems that we can solve, right? So we work with businesses, so we work with the enterprise, and then we build and deploy AI to their customers or to their employees. And for me as a marketer, my goal is to, create as simple and clear of a message and articulation of the problems that we are solving with AI, right? Because here's the thing. If you can schedule an appointment with your doctor in 3 minutes using an AI versus having to, wait on hold or wait, or go through this awful decision tree, that's a massive value if you can do something in 3 minutes that used to take 30 minutes, right? And what we're doing and what we're focused on is how do we tell this story in a way that really resonates with people? Because what's interesting is we sell to businesses, but a lot of times the users of our technology are consumers. And
Good point.
what's really cool is when we're talking to an executive at a bank, an executive at a bank is also a patient at some doctor, right? They're also a
Mm-hmm.
customer of some retailer or some restaurant. And same thing if you go to the executive of any other company, they are the consumer, the customer of all of the other companies that we work with. So, I think that making sure that we articulate how we solve, what problems we solve, how we solve those problems, and the value that we're creating and what we're trying to achieve together. Because then what we want to do is really hone in on that vision for how we're going to transform the way that they interact with every brand, right? Our goal is to connect people, connect human beings to the brands that we work with and rely on, right? I'm not going to say that we trust and love all of those brands, because there are some brands that, like, I personally don't care for the cell phone providers, right? And not like the hardware cell phone like Apple and Google, but like the telecom
Verizon,
providers who are
AT&T.
providing cell service. And I'm not going to name
Right.
any of them because, they're absolutely necessary businesses. I work with them. I rely on them. I need them in order to talk to people. And our job in the AI space is how we're looking at this is we want to connect humans to each of those brands, and we want to give brands a voice to speak to their customers. And I think that that's a really important thing that needs to happen. And what you'll realize is that when I say those words, I'm not telling you, we have the smartest AI that was trained on these, blah, 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 and we have the most advanced technical jargon, mumbo jumbo, whatever, right?
Right.
Because people start to tune out, right? I always bring up this analogy of like how sausage is made, because
Oof.
randomly my
Love that.
family, like I come from a family of butchers, a very blue collar, side of my family. And I love that. But like I know how sausage is made. You have to buy, like,
No
every
one
year
wants
we
to know
make
that.
sausage by hand, and you buy hundreds of pounds of pork shoulder and pork butt. You have to cut it all up, you have to cube it, then you have to grind all of it. You have to season it. Nobody cares about all of that. People want to
No one
know if
know.
you're buying an Italian sausage, a Polish sausage, or a bratwurst. That's the decision that they
That's
want
it.
to make. And that's the decision that I want our customers to have to make is, am I buying an AI agent that can do appointment scheduling? Am I buying an AI agent that can do password resets? Or am I buying an AI agent that can do both of those things and more, right? Like
Yeah.
it shouldn't be, we have this shiny object or this flashy thing that makes us so much better than competitor A, B, or C.
They don't care.
It's no, we solve this problem, we do it really well, and that translates into this value for you and this value for your customers. And we'd love to partner with you and go and transform the way that people interact with your brand together.
One of the things that's really hitting home for me that I feel like we lose sight of is our customers,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're so focused on selling to our customer
Right.
that we forget about the job of those folks and what they're trying to do, which is to sell on the
Right.
other side,
Yep.
right? And to be able to say that your customer is going to have a wonderful experience with your brand, our promise,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like is the ultimate goal. That makes everybody happy, right? If you can deliver that ultimate brand experience and you can promise that,
Yeah.
everybody wins. But we're so focused on our ICP. We
Mm-hmm.
got to sell to the CISO or the IT person
Mm-hmm.
or whoever that VP is, that VP decision
Right.
maker. Because let's be clear, it's not the CISO and it's not the practitioner.
Right.
It's that VP who ultimately has that sway both ways.
Mm-hmm.
If we can say to that VP, like, listen, we just want to make your job better by
Mm-hmm.
connecting with your customers in a really intentional way, like, sold.
Right.
Where do I sign, right? And so I'm so grateful you brought that to us today, Nick, especially as we think about cybersecurity, as we think about AI, as we think about data, and like, how do we help your customer, not you?
Right.
That's happenstance. That's the ultimate goal. But like, we need to help your customer to help you. Help me, help you, help me. Right.
Exactly.
And so I think if there's nothing else that people take away from this conversation, it's other than getting the tech in as many hands as possible to diminish the FUD and
Mm.
ultimately helping our customers is all we can do at the end of the day. Did I
Absolutely.
sum that up?
Yeah, I think that that's perfect.
Well, we're going to leave it at that, folks, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you can be the best marketer you can be for your brand and for your customers. And I think that's such a wonderful aha moment for us all. Thank you, Nick, for coming on and reminding us of why, it's we're all in this world of in between the research to the commercialization
Mm-hmm.
and how we market through that and reminding our customer at the end of the day and their customer is what matters and continuing to drive that home to make take the fear out of it. It's nothing to be scared of at the end. We got you. It's all good. It's There's always going to be bad guys out there, but if we're all in this together, it's going to be okay. Nick, before we go, two questions. One is, how can people find you if they want to learn more about Amelia, AI, and the way that you market in this very new world?
Yes. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I am not a big fan of social media in general, just because I'm not creating a ton of content on other social media channels. But LinkedIn, I'm fairly active on, so please connect on LinkedIn. If you go to Amelia's website as well, you can submit a form. There's some contact information, but LinkedIn is definitely the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Wonderful. We will be sure to do that because I think, yeah, I still kind of have questions, but I think this
Yeah.
is a good place to pause.
Yep, I
Pause. We'll
love
call it a
answer
pause.
it. Give me all the questions. We love to hear what questions are top of mind for people. We want to make it easy to understand complex topics. It's highly technical stuff, and we want to make it accessible to everyone. That is one of our goals and one of our missions.
I'm right there with you, Nick. So I'm here for it. If you comment on this post, even though it's already been live, we will get back to you. I solemnly swear, and I'll make sure that Nick sees your question and we respond. Nick, before we close out, you're more than a marketer. You're hanging out in New York City right now. I'm a little jealous. But for the rest of 2024, we are halfway through Q3. Literally, buckle up, y'all.
Praise.
This year. I don't know where it went. But what are you most looking forward to in like the last quarter and a half here?
Oh man, to be honest with you, I'm so grateful and blessed. This is not anything to do with my career, but my wife and I are expecting our first child in February of next year, And that is just the most, I mean, I'm sometimes just blown away that that's even happening, but 2024 has been a massive year. I got married. My wife is now pregnant, and I just can't wait to welcome our child into the world. I can't wait to, just enjoy life. I think that what I'm most excited for is just trying to spread more light and more love around the world. It has nothing to do with AI or technology, just trying to be a good human being to other people and make sure that people know that there's a lot of love and a lot of light in this world.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations, Nick. I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited for you and your wife. I am a mother and it is a life changer,
Yeah.
and I so appreciate the wanting of more love and light in this world, especially with a child on the way. If you have recommendations and positive vibes to send Nick's way about being a parent, bring
Yeah.
them on and all in. I am here for it. You're gonna get more advice than you care to, so I think we just need to shower you with congratulations and hoping for the best. And yeah, I want pictures. I want pictures.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. This episode was brought to you by MKG Marketing, the digital marketing agency that helps complex brands like AI, cybersecurity, and demand data management platforms get found via SEO and digital ads. It's hosted by me, Carrie Gard, CEO and co-founder of MKG Marketing. It's produced by the company called Snappy, and if you'd like to be a guest, DM me. I'd love to have you on the show. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.